She thought she was dialing a stranger. She had no idea she was dialing a ghost. It was 11:17 on a Tuesday night in November, the kind of cold that gets inside your coat and stays there. The kind of night where nobody lingers on the sidewalk longer than they have to. But Tessa Moran lingered. She always did. After a double shift at the Anchor, a diner on the corner of Rideau and Bank that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and old grease, she had exactly $4.60 in her pocket, a hole in her left boot, and nowhere she needed to be in a hurry. That was the only reason she saw the girl at all. The child was lying half on, half off the curb near the bus shelter on Gloucester Street. At first, Tessa thought she was a pile of someone's forgotten laundry. A dark coat, a small sneaker sticking out at a wrong angle. Then the pile moved. Tessa crossed the street at a near run. Up close, the girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Dark hair plastered to her forehead, lips the color of old paper. Her eyes were open but glassy, staring at the underside of the bus shelter roof, like she was trying to read something written there that nobody else could see. She was breathing. Shallow, uneven, but she was breathing. "Hey." Tessa dropped to her knees, ignoring the bite of cold concrete through her uniform pants. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Nothing. The girl's eyelids fluttered. "I've got you, you're okay." Tessa was already pulling out her phone with one hand, pressing the other gently against the child's cheek. "Cold. Too cold. Can you tell me your name?" The girl's lips moved. The sound that came out was barely a word. It sounded like Rosie. Rosie. Tessa kept her voice even, the way she did with the difficult tables. The ones where someone was about to cry or about to cause a scene and she had to be the wall between the situation and everyone else in the room. "Okay, Rosie. I'm Tessa. I'm right here." She was already dialing 911 when she noticed the phone clutched in the girl's small hand. A sleek, matte black thing, clearly expensive, cracked screen and all. On instinct, Tessa picked it up, unlocked, no passcode. The last call in the log was labeled only with a single letter, D. She told herself later that she called the number because it was faster than waiting. Because the ambulance would take 8 minutes minimum on a Tuesday night in November. And she needed someone who knew this child, someone who could tell the paramedics something useful. Allergies, medications, anything. She told herself it was purely practical. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. She pressed call. It rang twice. "Who is this?" Not a question, a statement. A voice that had clearly never needed to phrase things as questions because things simply happened when he spoke. Tessa swallowed. "My name is Tessa Moran. I'm on Gloucester Street in Ottawa. I found a little girl, Rosie, collapsed on the sidewalk. She's conscious, but barely. I've called an ambulance." This was the last number on her phone and I didn't know who else. There was a pause of exactly 3 seconds. She counted. "Don't move." The voice had gone absolutely flat. "Don't let anyone near her. What's she wearing?" "Well, right, not oh God. Just what's she wearing?" "A navy coat, gray scarf." "One sneaker. I don't know where the other one." "I know the coat." Another pause. "The ambulance. Did you call Ottawa General?" "I called 911, they said." "Tell them Ottawa General. Specifically, tell them Dr. Rains is expecting her." Say those exact words. Tessa opened her mouth to ask how he could possibly arrange that in the time it had taken her to describe a coat, but the line had already gone dead. She sat back on her heels in the cold and looked down at the little girl, who was looking back up at her, with eyes that were slightly more focused now. "Someone's coming for you," Tessa told her. "Someone who knows your name." Rosie blinked. Then, in a voice so small it was practically a whisper, "You smell like maple syrup." Tessa laughed. She couldn't help it. Occupational hazard. She didn't know. Sitting there on that cold curb with the child's hand wrapped around 2 of her fingers, that she had just made a phone call that would take apart every ordinary thing about her life and put it back together in a shape she wouldn't recognize. She didn't know the name that went with that voice, but she was about to find out. If you're just joining us here at Lily's Romance Library, welcome. Hit that subscribe button because this is the kind of story you're going to want to follow all the way to the end. His name was Félix Marchand. In certain rooms in Montreal, that name was spoken carefully, with the particular care you gave to things that were fragile and dangerous at the same time. In the financial district, he was the majority stakeholder of Marchand Group, a holding company with interests in real estate, private logistics, and 3 separate shell entities that no regulator had ever been able to fully map. On paper, he was 41, French-Canadian, widower, single father. Off paper, he was the man that 3 separate organized crime families in eastern Canada had agreed, unanimously and without meeting to discuss it, to simply leave alone. Félix Marchand did not have enemies, because his enemies had a way of quietly ceasing to be relevant. He did not have problems, because problems were resolved before they reached him. He did not have fear, because fear was a mechanism for people who had something left to lose, and Félix had already lost the thing that mattered most. Rosie was what remained. Rosie, who had his wife's dark hair and his own stubborn jaw. Rosie, who collected smooth rocks from every shoreline she visited and kept them in a jar on her windowsill. Rosie, who had been at a birthday party 3 blocks from Gloucester Street tonight under the supervision of her nanny, Yvette, until Yvette had called in a panic at 11 o'clock to say Rosie had been with her one moment and gone the next. Félix had been in his Ottawa office. Marchand Group had a satellite operation on Albert Street when Tessa Moran called. He was at the hospital in 9 minutes. He knew, before the doctors confirmed it, that this had not been an accident. He knew because Rosie's coat smelled faintly of something he recognized from a meeting 3 years ago in a warehouse in Laval, where a man had tried to use a chemical sedative to incapacitate one of Félix's associates. Bitter, faintly sweet, not something a 7-year-old encountered by accident. Someone had deliberately sedated his daughter and left her on a sidewalk in the cold. Dr. Rains, who owed Félix Marchand a substantial and complicated debt, met him at the entrance and spoke in low, quick sentences. Vitals stabilizing. No lasting damage expected. Whatever she'd been given was fast-acting but not lethal in the dose administered. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted Rosie dead. They'd wanted Félix to know they could get to her. He stood in the corridor outside Rosie's room for approximately 45 seconds, alone, with the particular stillness of a man who was deciding something. Then he sent 2 messages, one to his head of security, one to a man named Doyle who managed problems of a certain kind, and walked into his daughter's room. Rosie was sitting up, color coming back into her face, IV in her arm. She was eating a cracker that a nurse had brought her with the focused intensity of a child who had not eaten since the birthday party pizza. "Papa," she said it the French way, the way she always did. She held out her arms. Félix sat on the edge of the bed and held his daughter for a long moment without speaking. "There was a lady," Rosie said into his shoulder. "She smelled like breakfast." "I know," Félix said. "I'm going to find her." He found her in the hospital waiting room. Tessa Moran had apparently not left. She was sitting in one of the plastic chairs near the window, still in her diner uniform. Black pants, white button-down with the anchor embroidered on the pocket, with the paper cup of vending machine coffee, going cold in both hands. She had mud on her left knee from where she'd knelt on the curb. Her hair was coming out of its ponytail. She looked like someone who had been through a minor emergency and was still processing whether she was allowed to go home yet. She looked up when he stopped in front of her, and he saw her do the calculation that most people did when they first saw him in person. The suit, the height, the particular quality of stillness that his wife had once described, as you look like you own the room even when you're standing in a doorway, and then he saw her decide not to be intimidated by it. That was the first thing he noticed about Tessa Moran. "You stayed," he said. "I wanted to make sure she was okay." She said it simply, without apology, the way someone states a fact about themselves. They see no reason to dress up. "I didn't know if there was someone coming who knew her medical history. I have her other sneaker." She reached under the chair and produced a small purple sneaker. She must have lost it near the bus shelter. Félix took the sneaker. He looked at it for a moment. A small, ordinary thing. A thing that belonged to a small, ordinary girl who should never have ended up unconscious on a November sidewalk. And something shifted in his chest that he had long practiced at not letting reach his face. "She's asking for you," he said. Tessa blinked. "Sorry? My daughter. She's asking for the lady who smelled like breakfast." Something that might, under different circumstances, have been a smile crossed his face briefly. "I believe you made an impression." Rosie reached for Tessa's hand when she walked in, and held it with the uncomplicated certainty of a child who had decided, without any deliberation, that this person was trustworthy. Felix watched from the doorway while his daughter told Tessa about the birthday party. Amelie had a cake shaped like a horse. It was amazing. The rock she had found in the park last week, pale green, possibly jasper. She was going to look it up, and the fact that she had been very scared on the sidewalk, but not as scared as she might have been because Tessa had been there. "You talked to me," Rosie said. "You told me someone was coming. I believed you." Tessa's expression did something quiet and complicated. "Someone was coming," she said. "I wasn't wrong." Felix stepped fully into the room. "Rosie." His voice was gentle in a way it wasn't with most people. "I need to speak with Ms. Moran for a moment. Can you try to sleep?" Rosie gave him the look that meant "I will consider it. Can she come back?" He looked at Tessa. "If that's all right with you," she said carefully. "It is," Felix said. He led her to a small consultation room off the main corridor, empty at this hour, and closed the door. Tessa set her coffee cup on the counter and crossed her arms, not defensively, just the posture of someone who is cold and tired and paying attention. "I need to ask you some questions," he said. "I figured, when you found Rosie, was there anyone else nearby? Anyone who seemed to be watching or walking away quickly? A car that left in a hurry?" Tessa's eyes sharpened. She had been thinking about the same thing, he realized. She wasn't just a bystander recounting a frightening evening, she was replaying it. "There was a van," she said. "Dark blue. No plates visible. I noticed because there was a light on inside and someone was adjusting something in the front. I thought it was weird to be parked that close to the bus stop without hazards on, but I was focused on Rosie, so I didn't." She stopped. "I should have written down the make." "No," Felix said. "You should have focused on Rosie. You did exactly the right thing." She studied him. "Who are you?" "My name is Felix Marchand." He watched the name register. She knew it, not from the organized crime world he suspected, but from the business pages. Marchand Group had made the Ottawa Citizen 3 times in the last year. She was connecting it, sorting it, fitting it into a picture that was rapidly becoming more complicated than she'd expected. "So," her voice was measured, "Rosie wasn't left on that sidewalk by accident. No, and you think whoever did it is going to try again?" "I think," Felix said carefully, "that they may have already identified you as a complicating factor." Tessa went very still. "Because I called you, because someone may have watched you call me, and now you're here. And you've spoken to my daughter." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to pretend this is nothing, Miss Moran. You deserve an honest assessment." She laughed, short, a little incredulous. "You know, most people in your position would just send me home and pretend it never happened." "Most people in my position," Felix said, "don't have a 7-year-old who asked for you by name before she finished her cracker." There was a silence between them. "What are you offering?" Tessa asked. "Temporary protective arrangements, nothing invasive. A driver, secure accommodation for a few nights, until we understand the scope of what happened tonight." He paused. "And my personal assurance that I do not forget debts. I didn't do it for a debt." "I know." The certainty in his voice was something that clearly surprised her, because her chin came up slightly. "That's precisely why I'm offering one." She said she needed to think about it. She went back and sat with Rosie until the girl fell asleep, Tessa's hand still loosely enclosed in Rosie's. And when she finally came out into the corridor, Felix was still there, standing against the wall with his phone face down in his hand, not scrolling, not reading, just waiting. Tessa had lived 26 years on the particular fuel of not needing anyone to wait for her. Shift changes and student loans and a mother in Sudbury, who called on Sundays if she remembered. A life that fit neatly into a basement apartment on Somerset, and a 4-day work week, and the small satisfaction of doing the job well enough that the regulars left good tips. A life where nobody stood in a hospital corridor at 1 in the morning and waited. She told him she'd take the driver. If you're liking this story so far, now is a great time to tap that like button. It helps more people find stories like this one, and trust me, this one is just getting started. The driver was a quiet man named Thierry, who wore a gray wool coat and opened the car door without being asked. The car was not a car so much as a moving room, heated leather, tinted windows, a silence so complete that the city outside felt like something happening to someone else. Tessa looked out the window at Ottawa passing by. The canal, the stone buildings, the lit-up Chateau Laurier like something from a postcard, and tried to organize the last 3 hours into something that made sense. What she kept coming back to was not the cold or the child, or even the conversation in the consultation room. What she kept coming back to was the way Félix Marchand had looked at his daughter's sneaker. Just for a second. That shift behind his eyes that he'd locked down immediately, the way a door blows open in the wind, and then someone very deliberately closes it again. She had seen that expression before, on the faces of people in the diner, who were one more bad thing away from the end of their rope, who came in for coffee at 2 in the afternoon, not because they wanted coffee, but because they couldn't go back to wherever home was yet. She thought, this man is terrified, and she thought, he will never let it show, and she thought, whoever went after his daughter had no idea what they have just started. The place Thierry took her to was not a hotel. It was a private residence on a quiet street in New Edinburgh, tall, narrow brick, the kind of house that had been renovated to within an inch of its life, and then furnished by someone who knew what they were doing. A woman named Dara met her at the door, professional and unhurried, showed her to a room on the second floor, with a window that looked out over a snow-dusted garden. Mr. Marchand says there are clothes in the wardrobe in approximately your size, Dara said. And there's food downstairs if you need it. He'll be here at 7. He'll be here, Tessa repeated. He doesn't sleep well when Rosie's in hospital. She said it without judgment, just information. He tends to work. After Dara left, Tessa sat on the edge of the bed for a moment in the silent room. Then she pulled out her phone and called her manager at the Anchor and left a voicemail saying she had a family situation and could someone cover her Thursday morning shift. Then she looked at the ceiling. You smell like maple syrup. You talked to me. I believed you. She had made $14 in tips on the Tuesday double. She had a hole in her boot. She had found a little girl unconscious on a sidewalk, and now she was sitting in a house that cost more per square foot than she made in a year. She did not feel out of her depth. She felt, and she would not have been able to explain this to anyone, like she had arrived somewhere she didn't have a map for, but that the arriving had been, somehow, the right thing. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Félix Marchand sat across from Tessa Moran at the kitchen table, with 2 cups of very good coffee between them and a folder that he placed on the table but did not open yet. He had been awake since the hospital. She could tell, not from disarray, because he was impeccably put together in a dark sweater and charcoal trousers, but from the quality of his stillness. The kind that came from a night spent thinking hard in a quiet room. We identified the van, he said. It was registered to a numbered company. The numbered company traces back, with some effort, to a man named Soren Vance. He watched her face. Should that name mean something to me, she asked. Not necessarily. He's the CFO of a real estate development firm. Very legitimate on the surface. He paused. He's also the man who approached me 6 months ago with a partnership offer I declined. What kind of offer? The kind where the partnership is a courtesy and the real offer is do what we want or we will find a way to make you do what we want. He turned his coffee cup once in both hands. I declined. I made it clear that I found the approach discourteous. I believed the matter was closed. But it wasn't. Apparently, Soren Vance decided to send a message. Tessa looked at the folder. Is that what's in there? That's everything my security team compiled overnight. I'm showing you because I think you're entitled to understand what happened and why. He met her eyes. And because I want to ask if you remember anything else about the van. Anything at all. She thought about it. Really thought, which he watched her do. Eyes slightly unfocused, going back to that sidewalk, that bus shelter, that particular quality of lamplight on wet pavement. There was a magnet on the back, she said. One of those rectangular ones, like a business logo. But I couldn't read it from where I was standing. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to have on a van with no plates visible. Felix took out his phone and typed something. That might be enough, he said, to find them, to confirm what we already suspect. He put the phone face down on the table, and confirmation is all we need. There was a shift over the next 48 hours that Tessa couldn't precisely point to. It wasn't a moment. It was more like a temperature change, the way you don't notice a room getting colder until you realize you've been cold for a while. She went back to see Rosie that morning. Rosie was being discharged by noon, and she had apparently told every nurse on the ward about the rock collection and interrogated the attending physician about whether Jasper was igneous or sedimentary. Metamorphic, the doctor had said. Rosie had looked satisfied. Tessa brought her a maple butter tart from the bakery around the corner because she didn't know what else to bring a 7-year-old who had everything, and also because Rosie had called her the breakfast lady, and it seemed important to lean into that. Rosie ate the butter tart in 4 bites and then wanted to know if Tessa had ever been to the Rideau Canal when it froze. "Every winter," Tessa said. "I used to skate to work." Rosie looked at her father. "Papa, she skated to work." "Impressive," Felix said from the chair in the corner where he had going through something on his phone. He looked up. Something in the look was different from how he'd looked at her the night before, less assessing. Something else. Something she filed away without examining it yet. It took 4 days. On the 4th day, Felix came to the kitchen at 8 in the morning with the folder again, and this time he opened it. The magnet on the van had been from a landscaping company, a company that shared a registered address with one of Soren Vance's shell entities. Doyle, who managed problems of a certain kind, had spent 72 hours dismantling the paper trail, and what he had found was that Soren Vance was not operating alone. He was the visible surface of something considerably larger, a syndicate that had been quietly acquiring distressed properties across eastern Canada for the past 4 years, using methods that ranged from financial pressure to intimidation to, apparently, sedating the children of inconvenient men. "What happens to him?" Tessa asked. Felix was quiet for a moment. "Nothing you need to be concerned about. That's not an answer." He looked at her. "No," he said, "it's not." She nodded slowly. She thought about what she knew and what she didn't know and what, in the end, she was comfortable not knowing. She had been in enough uncomfortable situations to understand the difference between a thing that was wrong and a thing that was simply outside her sight line. "Rosie's going back to Montreal," he said. "Increased security. A new protocol for school and activities." He paused. "She asked if you could visit." Tessa looked at her coffee. "I have 4 shifts a week at the Anchor," she said. "I have $400 left in my checking account. I have a hole in my boot." She looked up. "I'm not someone who visits Montreal." "You could be," Felix said, simply, without pressure. The way he said everything, as though he was only stating an available fact, and what you did with the fact was entirely your business. Tessa was quiet for a long moment. "You don't know me," she said. "You know I found your daughter on a sidewalk and I called the right number and I stayed. That's all you know." "It's more than you think," he said. She pushed back her chair and walked to the window, arms crossed, looking out at the snow-dusted garden. The sky over New Edinburgh was that particular flat winter white that meant more snow was coming, probably by afternoon. "I'm not afraid of complicated," she said finally. "In case that's what you're trying to figure out." She heard him set down his coffee cup. "I know," Felix Marchand said. "That's precisely what I was trying to figure out." 3 weeks later, Tessa Moran stood in a kitchen in Montreal. Warm light, stone counters, a jar of smooth rocks on the windowsill, while Rosie explained, with tremendous seriousness, that the pale green one was definitely Jasper, and she had looked it up twice to be sure. She had a new boot. The hole had been her left foot's problem, and now it wasn't. She still had 4 shifts a week, though the diner was in a different city now, and the tips were better. She had, against every expectation she'd built into the architecture of her life, allowed herself to arrive somewhere she hadn't planned for. It turned out that was the thing about unlocking a stranger's phone at 11:10 on a Tuesday night in November and pressing call without knowing who was on the other end. Sometimes the number you dial is the one that changes everything. And if you want to know what happened to Soren Vance, and to every person who thought they could use a 7-year-old girl to send a message to the wrong man, drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Lily's Romance Library. Rosie's rock collection is growing, Tessa's boots are whole, and Felix Marchand is a man who does not forget debts. Some stories are just getting started.